This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrongTV. My guest this segment is Kevin Bocek of Venafi. He's going to tell us a little bit about Venafi, a little bit about himself, and a little bit about his position there, and then we're going to have hopefully a great conversation. Hey Kevin, welcome to TechStrongTV.
Alan, great to be here.
Thank you. It's great to have you on. So Kevin, I kind of laid out your mission there a little bit. You want to get to it and, give us a little maybe Venafi background, though I think most of the audience knows Venafi, but tell us anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
History.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my position is one just of fun, but, I get to help security leaders, engineers, as they're working on this big problem of machine identity management. I mean, the whole world, whether you're running in the cloud, whether you're running Kubernetes, service mesh, is all going to the perimeter, which is identity. And we've thought a lot about human identity. Everyone knows, about usernames, passwords, and we're moving to biometrics and passwordless and zero trust for remote access. But the other side of identity is, of course, all about machines. Whether that's, again, a Kubernetes cluster, an Amazon instance. Great thing is identity forms that perimeter wherever we're running. And so machine identity is this feature. Actually, Gartner said that this year when they were putting together their top 8 cybersecurity trends, is that machine identity was one of them because it's connected with everything as we go ahead. So that's the problem space that Venafi works on, machine identity management. And I get to have fun as I work with security leaders, as I work with the innovators in our ecosystem, like HashiCorp, like F5, like Citrix. And then also I get to work on the threat side too. So we have a dedicated team that thinks every day about what the attackers are doing with machine identities. Go figure, they're doing a lot, and how we can be prepared and better defend.
Absolutely. And you're right, Kevin. You mentioned the word perimeter, right? Look, for a long time, perimeter to me meant that sort of moat and castle perimeter around your LAN where you had big routers and firewalls and, 6 and 7 figure machines that would defend the perimeter. But today, of course, the perimeter is very different, right? I like to say, as we move into a post-COVID posture, it's not just work from home, it's work from anywhere. It's work from where you want. And so that perimeter goes with you. Whether you're accessing it on a beach, in a hotel, on a plane, or anywhere else, your perimeter, you want to call it a micro perimeter or whatever, surrounds you and your device, as well as that machine that you're accessing, whether it be, and it's data. And so identity and access control is sort of the new black. It's a very different identity and access control where you had, some admin running AD and everyone was on AD and, in the LAN. Today, AD doesn't account for Kubernetes instances, right? For every container we've got out there. And certainly not, with all the machine identities. And again, it's something, our audience is savvy to this, but, there's probably 10 or more machine identities for every person identity or individual, human identity out there. So it's a huge
attack surface is what it is, unfortunately.
Growing, of course. Yeah, of course, and growing because, the engineer's creativity is pretty much the perimeter because it's what they're able to build in the cloud, what they're able to connect together through different services and APIs. And how do I know your cloud from my cloud? It's the machine identity, which is pretty tough for us to get around because we're humans and we don't think like machines. So we get how we operate, but how machines operate, of course, very different. And they operate instantly, much, much faster, which, of course, to the attacker is a great opportunity, which we saw even in the, I would call them the SolarWinds breaches. we saw where the attackers were able to actually then get a hold of a machine identity to stamp out access tokens to Office 365. And that, stamping out of all of these access tokens by just one identity gave then a huge opportunity for attack. So that's where we can see that the speed really changes both how we as defenders and also how we need to help engineers. I liken to think about it, as like a Formula One engineer. So we have to help our engineers go as fast as possible, but also we think about safety. Because if you can't finish the race, if you can't finish it alive, well, then, might as well not be racing. So I think it's an exciting time. And the good thing, again, is that this idea about identity now is actually built in to everything. Whether you're using AWS or Google or Azure or, again, Kubernetes or Istio, it's all built in. Now, of course, that's the thing you said was so different than it used to be with Microsoft AD. It was all one place. It was all there. Now you've got 10, 20 different sources. And you're right, the number of machine identities are exploding. We find, usually, you said 10x, it's 20 and growing because we can spin up instances in, let's say, a cloud or Kubernetes cluster faster, of course, than we create customers' employees. So it's just exploding.
Those customer employees are 9 months minimum to, just in the womb, and then 18, 20 years till they grow up, where, the average lifespan of a container is like 5 seconds.
Right.
But so obviously you're right, we're dealing with different scale there. So I think we've laid out kind of what we do and what the mission is, Kevin, really well. You've got some recent kind of news or information you want to share with our audience. So why don't we?
I'm sorry I took you down that path that we went down there.
That's great.
Yeah, no.
I think is what we see, of course, is, it's, I think, very, very, very topical, which is the attackers are shifting left, basically getting ahead of our engineers. We can see that, of course, in the SolarWinds breaches. I call them breaches because it's not just one, but many. We can see that in the Code Cove attacks, where, again, you had this place where engineers hung out, and then, of course, a variety of machine identities were exposed, and some of them, that allowed you to know if code could be trusted or not. And that's, I think, something that's different now as those of us as security professionals, I would say as security engineers, we have to think ahead of the attacker and how they're going to attack our supply chains. That's one thing, as I've talked to chief security officers, and it might be different than if you're a DevOps engineer and you're talking about the idea of supply chain. When a CISO oftentimes thinks about their supply chain, they think a lot about the packaged software, the software that their business acquires and then runs. You talk to an engineer, they're like, hey, my supply chain is all the open source software we bring in, all the software and services and clouds that we use to actually then run the business. So every business is a software developer, and that's a big mind shift. Again, we'll talk, in the industry about shifting left, but what does it really, really mean? Everyone's a software engineer. That's why I like to say we're security engineers. Everyone's a software developer, and we need to think like one because the attackers are already there and they're showing
Absolutely.
I agree. Kevin, last week was RSA week, right? RSA conference. And I had two friends of mine on our special edition TechStrong TV for that. Josh Corman and Chris Weisbold. So Josh is now working with Homeland Security. And Chris, of course, co-founder of Veracode. And their talk at RSA was on the rise and the need of why every company that you just described should install or should have someone, a chief product security officer. Someone whose job it is whether you're rolling your own software, right, with a bunch of open source components, or using third party stuff that you still got to take a look at. Does it have its bill of materials, right? If it's your own software, what preventative, someone whose job it is, right? Because oftentimes, Kevin, it was a fascinating interview. When you look at the role of the CISO, that's not their job for a lot of these guys. The CISO's worried, am I getting breached? Is my...
Are my processes and tools up to, they're looking right, not left. Right. Let's put it that way. Right.
Now, but when you look at the product guys, they want to get product out. Again, whether it's something we rolled our own or it's third party, they're getting that functionality out to the team. They're not necessarily security engineers.
They may be software engineers,
but not security. So who owns this then, right?
Yes.
And there's a hole, right? It seems to be in a very similar thing you're talking about.
And I've been working with Chris a lot from Veracode, and there are two thoughts, which is, hey, you need to have a separate team, and we'll go right at a separate team that thinks about what you just said, product security, that works with engineers. Or that's a team that comes from, what you just talked about, that runs the business infrastructure security and then works with engineers. I can tell you what engineers want. Engineers want a separate team. They want it to be part of, that reports to the VP of engineering or the chief digital officer, not into the chief security officer. I think we got to challenge ourselves. So if you're in a security team, you got to challenge yourself, I think, to then say, actually, I am a security engineer. I, go learn how to code. And you probably did at some point, but you probably don't know Go or Rust these days. Those are the hot languages, because that's the future. The future is we all build product. We all are software development companies, whether we're a bank, whether we're a retailer, a manufacturer, and this is just starting. And I think it's going to be a momentous event, and it's a challenge for us. As security professionals, it might be like, the event that killed off the dinosaurs. It might be the asteroid coming. And can we be mammals and, survive?
Adapt.
I think we can, because we've always been adept as security professionals. I think this is a big change, big change. And particularly too, because as we use more and more cloud services, again, we've talked about the perimeter going. We don't need, and we won't have the same type of infrastructure. And again, what is the number one competitive advantage in 2021 to any business? It's their software developers. It's not, I have gray hair. It's not, it used to be the managers and what you had up here, but it's the software developers and the algorithms that they build. So again, that is a challenge. And I know if you talk with many, they'll say, hey, you know what? You got to have a separate product security team because they got to be one with the engineers. I'm not accepting that yet. I think this is our opportunity to change as security professionals. And if you talk to the likes at Chris or Veracode, or talk to the team at CloudBees or GitLab, what are they talking about these days? You got to both secure the pipeline is what comes out of the pipeline. So the product, and you got to secure what's in the pipeline, actually what's going on as you build software. Very, very different than what we used to think of as, hey, we ran some infrastructure, secured networks. I think it's exciting time. But again, you know what? There's an asteroid coming of huge change. So let's take this lesson. Yeah, it was RSA last week. Wow. Went to my first RSA conference in 1998. So now I show how much really gray hair I've got.
Yeah, no,
things have changed. The world has changed. It's now, again, we talked about machine identity. It's about the engineer. It's about as many cloud services as they consume to get something out, a business product out fast. Yeah, it's really, really different.
Yep.
And so let me ask you, how about Alan? Where did Chris and where did it come down to in that discussion? Should there be a separate
I put it to him. I put it to him just the way you did. Because do we need to create sort of shadow security? Because
in some ways, that's what that becomes.
It's real
it's
security.
Shadow security.
Yeah.
But no, they believe every. So here's what they kind of cut the baby in half. Right, that chief product security officer should be dotted lined, or at least a peer of the CISO, but needs to work closely with the CISO because this stuff doesn't exist in a vacuum. But he really has to be part of that product team.
Right, he's
part of that organization and just working closely and dotted line into security. So it was look, RSA is available on demand. You can go check out their talk on it. But Kevin, here's the thing now. Let's bring this back to machine identities and what does it mean there, right? Supply chain attacks, well, they got in by, being able to get into a machine that was
inserting in components and stuff. What does it mean for us in terms of machine identity and machine security?
Right. Well, we all need to learn new skills. And this is the challenge because it used to be we could think in human constructs. We could think of firewalls. We could think of directories. We could think of antivirus. I mean, this is all, well past. I mean, but these were things as humans that we could understand. And as humans, we've got a challenge to, keep up with engineers, keep up with these new constructs and something like machine identity, because how does a machine, authenticate, authorize itself to another machine on scale? Now, maybe one-to-one, we as humans can get that, but when you're doing that thousands and thousands of times over, that's tough. So that's something that I think, and that's why Gartner recognized this as, such an important trend this year and beyond. And it's something new, completely new. And I think, that's where I see certainly organizations looking at, do I need to have a human identity team and a machine identity team? Because they are different. I can, there are going to be a lot more machines out there to the future. So we're probably going to have to even worry more about the machine identity than the human identity. Of course, what are some of these things? These are things we know, like TLS certificates. It's code signing. It's things, though, like JOT tokens that we use for authentication, authorization of APIs. It's things like SPIFFE IDs that we use in microservices. Wow, the number are, again, compared to the old days when we had Active Directory, it was nice, one place for all usernames, passwords. There are many, many sources. And the difference, too, with machine identities that establish the perimeter is they live out there with the applications. It's not like we used to have with, again, an AD, or even today with an Okta. We've got one source where we administer our human identities. Machine identities live out with the applications. And that's a big change to all those types of identities I mentioned. So this is part of this whole trend, again, getting closer to engineers. You got to be close to that because they're at the tip of the spear. They're creating them, they're creating machine identities, not us back in the security team. Again, maybe like it was before.
Absolutely. Kevin, we're about out of time, man. I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to need to continue this conversation, maybe in person. No promises. But, we'd love to have you on. Thank you so much for being our guest here.
All right. Have a great afternoon. I'll see you.
All righty. Kevin Bocek here on TechStrongTV. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with another guest.